Professor Maynard, Dr. Zangan, welcome to the Department of Economics and Management at the University of Ferrara. We are very happy and honored to have you here with us. Professor Timo Maynard holds the Dr. Aron Oetkar Chair of Business Psychology and Leadership at H. Leipzig Graduate School of Management in Germany and serves as head of the Center for Leadership and Values in Society at the University of St. Gallen in Switzerland. Timo Maynard has promoted innovative tools such as the Public Value Scorecard, designed to measure the social contribution of organizations. And he also publishes the Public Value Atlas in Switzerland and Germany, aimed at highlighting the social benefit provided by companies and institutions. Professor Maynard is also co-founder and a jury member of the Public Value Award for Startups, an initiative that rewards entrepreneurship oriented toward the common good. Among his achievements are the HH Best Lecturer Award in 2017, Most Innovative Learning Approach Award in 2022, Public Value First Award again in 2022, and many other prestigious awards. His research focuses on public value, of course, a concept he has helped to develop also by crafting the so-called St. Gallen public value approach, combining psychological and managerial perspectives. And welcome to Clemens Söngen. Dr. Söngen is a PhD student and a research associate at H. Leipzig Graduate School of Management, graduated in psychology at the University of Marburg. He is specializing in innovation and entrepreneurship studies with a focus on innovative social startups and the creation of public value. Thanks to the presence of Professor Maynard in Ferrara, here in Ferrara, today we would like to know more about the concept of public value, its history, its present and its future prospect in such an uncertain world scenario. But what is public value? Public value is a kaleidoscopic concept that has been much explored in the scientific literature, but still little known in institutional context. In Italian regulatory framework under construction, which will be approved by the Italian Italian Minister for Public Administration around June 2025. The public value is the polar star of Italian public administrations and can be explained according to three different perspectives. The first perspective is the objective perspective, the public administration perspective. Second, the subjective or stakeholder perspective. And third, the joint perspective. According to the objective perspective, measured by the Research Center on Public Value, CHERVAP, public value can be understood in three ways. Public value in a broad sense, public value in the strict sense or external public value, and internal public value. Public value in a broad sense or value of values is composed of external and internal public value. In this concept, the internal impact on the quantity and the quality of resources, for example, human resources, digital resources, economic resources, act as drivers to improve performance, which contribute to improving external impact, for example, social impact, economic impact, environmental impact. The value of values can be measured by a composite index that normalizes and aggregates the different dimensions of internal and external well-being through the so-called public value pyramid. External public value, or public value in the strict sense, is the overall and multidimensional level of well-being of citizens, companies, and institutions, and other stakeholders, at the same time in all dimensions. And it can be measured on as the average impact or impact of impacts generated by public administration's policies, projects, or services on the multidimensional well-being. Pursuing the public value means treating economic myopia or environmental myopia, for example, with balanced policies able to set priorities without destroying the other dimension of public value, of well-being. Moreover, internal public value is the quantitative and qualitative level of public administration resources for us administrative health, but also is the level of effectiveness and efficiencies, in other words, performances. According to the subjective or stakeholder perspective, public value is the level of multidimensional well-being recognized or perceived by citizens, by other stakeholders through subjective perception analysis. In this area, Professor Meder is the world reference point of the subject perspective of public value. In keep with the intellectual tradition of Peter Drucker and the Saint Gallen management model, the societal wealth creation of an organization is captured conceptually and examined empirically by means of philosophical value, psychological and sociological theories. According to Professor Maynard, public value is therefore a psychological phenomenon. Even more, I quote, public value is anything people put value to with regard to the public. Finally, in a joint perspective between objective and subjective perspective, public value can be understood as shared public value, conceived as the level of multidimensional well-being planned and evaluated together with citizens, enterprises, and other stakeholders through participatory paths. I'd like to conclude my speech with a question that has been with me for some days. Professor Maynard was born on the 14th of July and loves public value. I was born on 14th of July, really? And I love public value. Is this a coincidence, or should we introduce a new zodiac sign?
It's definitely not a coincidence. There's something in the air between the two of us. Professor Caliado, dear Enrico, dear Luca, thanks for this invitation. We are enthusiastic, mesmerized. I'm a little bit nervous, I may say so. Enrico said to me, no, you're among friends, you shouldn't be nervous. Nevertheless, I'm quite excited, and I guess it's also for Clemens. Clemens and me, we are the two guys now from Leipzig. Microphone? Okay. Having 45 minutes to somehow introduce our way of thinking. It's a way of thinking, and a way of feeling. It's both. And if I may start with a personal confession, you also made a personal confession. I started dedicating my whole academic career to this concept when I was with a consultancy in McKinsey in a project in the public sector, when I felt, oh, something is disappearing, something is missing. There's new public management, but there must be more to it. And then I got excited to meet Mark Moore, and I started at St. Gallen, and nobody wanted to publish with me. Public value, what's this? It's not promising. You never get to A journals, you never get professorship. But I felt I should do, and I could not to do this. And since then, I'm in this field. I met a couple of people, the giants of the field, John Bennington and Mark Moore, of course, and now this growing Italian arm to the public value research. And what I would like to introduce is this idea public value is not such a new kid on the block. It has ever been there in different shades, in different colors, call it bonum commune, call it the common good. And this renaissance of common goods thinking in the 90s, there was a reason. I will start with this in a minute. And if sustainability dies, if ESG dies, if SDG dies, public value will survive because it's a much stronger concept. Whether we call it public value or common, that's not so super important. It's important for getting things published. But to address the collective quality of a social system which cannot be reduced to individual gains is also, and I said yesterday in your fantastic panel, it's a very European tradition, maybe also an Asian tradition, to address the collective without sacrificing the individual. And I was born on July 14th in a country called German Democratic Republic, which no longer exists, where they somehow try to exaggerate the ideological part on the individual. And since then, I refuse any kind of pretending to know what's good for me or good for you. But this Christian idea of subsidiarity on the one hand side and the concerns for the collective, this is the tension I'm interested in. To me, public value is a concept to articulate the individual and the group, the personal and the collective. And if this tension has a false balance, we enter strange times. And maybe neoliberalism did kind of move this tension to something which we no longer regard as productive. And on the other hand, populism, we talked about this on Monday, is another way of, another danger for this healthy balance. In a nutshell, public value is nothing else, I know it's dangerous to use the sentences, nothing else, but to flourish in community. That's it. Flourish in community. And we do all the technical things, measurements, KPIs, atlas, scorecards and things. To flourish in community means a lot for children, for elderly people, for adults, for managers, and so on. But this, to me, is the more common sense approach to why public value matters in our times of climate change, of anti-whatever, anti-democratic movements, populist movements. And we did choose Clemens and myself. I will start and then Clemens will jump in. And of course, the most we would love to hear is what the young scholars say, what their plans are, and then the next part of today's session. But first, we start with this idea: where do we come from, where it's now, and where we think the future could lie, maybe also a joint future. In collaborating, exchanging ideas, and writing things together, and making the next giant leap in public value research. Before going to this, I start with this idea: where do we come from? And when I asked Mark Moore, the father of the term, how did you invent this? And Mark told me once in a seminar with managers, we had a hard time to discuss what it means to work as a public servant, public administration. The private sector has this notion of shareholder value. Is there something positive for us, not just wasting other people's money, tax money and so on? And some seminar participant said, oh, why not talking about we also create value? So it was a seminar situation where the term was invented, and then Mark wrote this fantastic book in 1995 to somehow balance what has been unbalanced in times of public reform, public administration reforms. With the old Weberian bureaucratic model no longer obviously doing the job, then with new public management ideas, looking at citizens as customers, having managerial approaches, introducing a KPIs, controlling system, and so on and so forth. Obviously, although with some bad side effects, and public value in its early days was the promise to reconcile, to not let go managerial ideas without becoming managerialist, to not let go neutrality of public administration, but at the same time not just being the executive power of some parliament decision, but also be creative. So the question is no longer we execute what the politicians said, but also we contribute by making suggestions, by entrepreneurial spirit in the right way. And entrepreneurial spirit in the right way, what does it mean? And then Mark came up and said, well, public managers are like explorers, not without legitimacy, but within a certain space given, they can extend their mandate without platonic guardians of the public value of the common good. The question did arise, and early critics said, oh, public value is dangerous because it says that public managers are entitled to build on their own agenda, to turn a library, Mark Moore's example, into some social care part without having political backbones. The political will may be not the same as the will of the individual managers. This was the early days. This was the starting point. And this was where I came in. And since then, I tried together with my colleagues in St. Gallen and now Leipzig since 10 years already, to take the concept and do some micro-foundation to relate it to the individual psyche, how groups work, how individuals' needs structure come into play. Because Marx said to me, I was not interested. Of course, public value is rooted in desires, but he was not a psychologist. As a political scientist, he kind of built this, what then he called strategic triangle. You all, I guess, found familiar with the legitimacy and support, capacity, and this kind of authoring environment stuff. And then we tried to add this psychological perspective. And I came to conclude, without being an idealist in terms of philosophy, that at the end, in my opinion, it has to be perceived. Public value is never only delivered, it has to be perceived to become true, to become reality, to become a social reality. People need to feel it. So we have to address feelings and needs in a responsible way. And this was where the psychological perspective came into play, next to Mark Moore, Barry Boseman, John Bennington, and others in the early days. And now we have to add, of course, the Italian school, I would call this, your school, to speak about this psychological part of it. And the second was to take the construct from the public sector to all sectors. It was the early days when Beck Jorgensen, for example, from Denmark said, public value is not just governmental. So we took the idea to private sector, to churches, to sports clubs, to startups. And since then, what developed in Leipzig is a broad spectrum. You already mentioned it. And we may talk later on, also in the workshop part, what our research interests are, where we could maybe join forces. We even invented an interactive chatbot where you can talk to him in every language 24/7 about public value, back and forth, back and forth. We have a festival in Lisbon, also with you already, as a very important player and contributor. We do a Startups Award. We analyzed 1,000 startups and more based on public value scorecard. We have studies already, the beginning of relationship between public value success in terms of publicly rich business models and financial success. We do the Atlas, we do many, many things, and including this particular Atlas, Switzerland, Germany, maybe next time also in Italy, or let's do it together in the G7 world, why not? Why not? To spread the word. To spread the word is not like a gospel, because what we tried to avoid from the beginning was not to say public value is good for you, do more of it. But to investigate public value from a functional point of view. What role does it play in organizational life for people, in terms of work engagement, in terms of happiness, in terms of many other, let's say, dependent variables, effects, so to speak. What's the role of the common good to become a responsible, mature personality? That's what we call the flourishing community. That's the idea behind. The first direction is to add psychology to it, and the second, to relate it to other sectors. Because all organizations have a social function. It's the Druckerian, already mentioned, Peter Drucker idea, perform a social function, not only public administration, but also startups and so on. And in our program, we have multiple research areas. We have about 10 doctoral students working in different areas, more or less closely related to the public value thinking. And when I start teaching in Leipzig with our business students, we use this idea. We have our own leadership model, called Leipzig leadership model. Left-hand side, grand challenges. In the middle, purpose, effectiveness, all the struggles and tensions related to this, how to reconcile different aspirations. On the right-hand side, we argue good organizational performance, public sector, private sector, whatever, is to achieve performance goals of the organizations, help individuals to grow, and last but not least, to create public value. And this idea to create public value as a way of relating to society has many, many roots. I just, in this round, take this for granted that we have a case to argue why this is not just an add-on, some philanthropic, some extra mile, some CSR, but an integral part of any organization embedded in what's called the social system or society or in a market. The other day we talked to Mayana Matsukato, who received last year the Public Value Award for Lifetime Achievement in Lisbon. You all are invited to come to Lisbon, join Luca. We agree on this, the underlying function of an organization has to considered early on and not just after the fact. That's why I'm so enthusiastic, and I told Mayana, she's also Italian, about your initiative, and she said, oh, I have to know this, how Italy at the forefront, to have this in your legislation even. And I guess she might approach, at least I will send her all the stuff. We only met last week or the week before. Oh, please send it to me. And she might respond to this argument that public value is built in and not just some extra mile after the fact. First is the business, then public value, but public value from the start. That's what we teach also in our students, and we develop measurements and things how to operationalize this. But let me start with this initial idea that it's not normative. That's very important to me, why it's not so normative. When you, for example, ask our students, would you recommend HHL to a friend to study at our school? And second, would this school be part of an ideal society? Would it perform well in terms of societal contribution? And what you can see is there's a discrepancy. And you put it this way, between customer value, or you may say citizen value, and public value. And this is a door opening for us that customer satisfaction or citizen satisfaction alone is not enough. That's one door for public value researchers, I would argue, or in practice. There's a difference between the two levels of experience. You might recommend because you have better career chances afterwards, having studied at our school, but you might then say, oh, actually, in a world where we adapt to the Anthropocene, where we adapt to different trends, business schools no longer have a place because they just repeat what we don't need anymore, this kind of societal contribution. The public value of HHL is obviously lower than its customer value. Here you see a matrix from an empirical study where we try to map customer value and public value along two axes. And you see on the lower left, there are a number of German institutions, from public to private sector, from sports clubs to the schools. Customer value might be a precondition, but not a sufficient condition for public value creation. This might be important to say there's no public value without customer value. But customer value is not enough. That's the idea behind. There's also a measurement we can share. It's published, single item measurement. It has quite some power. We see only very few organizations. It's the German Red Cross and our SU who managed to be strong in the two dimensions. What is there, the gap? It's also an interesting argument if you enter research, you want to get funding, to say, well, there's something missing, and if you want to improve on public value, you better measure it next to customer value. That's one idea. Where we also enter our discussions with business students. What's new? What's new about public? It's new that there's a societal dimension not addressed in the current measurement system, current KPIs. All of this, and this is actually our most fundamental premise, let's say so. Most fundamental premise, if we want to sustain free market, free enterprise, private property rights, competition, this might be the underlying idea. It's not just good for business, but any enterprise has to be justified as only being good for society. And what we do in Leipzig and St. Gallen is to try to operationalize what this means, what the public is, what society is, what good is, this kind of underlying idea. And my experience is if you use a quote from Peter Drucker, you can convey message more powerful, because Drucker said it. If Drucker said it, it has more, it's like a little bit of, it's the Pope of management. I know it's difficult to compare the Pope to any other person on earth, but let's say in the academic era I live, it's important to have a Drucker quote. It's always helpful. The father of modern management in a way. This justification is more than, as I said, philanthropic. And I realized this when coming to terms with the question, there are so many alternatives. The public good, economists talk about, the public benefit. Political scientists might talk about the public will or the public or the general interest or the commonwealths, we have even the commonwealth countries. And the question was, do we need yet another term? Is it really necessary? And I would say it's at least useful. Afterwards, people will tell in retrospectives whether it was successful, but the hypothesis these days, it's useful to have this term to translate all the philosophical ideas into a more managerial, from the law people into a more organizational language, kind of. That's why the term public value sounds great. Let's make it also great. Also being aware that we are on the shoulders of giants. Everything has been said, not just by Drucker, but by Aristotle and so on. You can build on those, and that's maybe also a derived meaning. And don't pretend that everything is new, but it's a new kind of, a new bottle, let's say, a new container, a new promise, how to operationalize this idea of well-being in society and companies, organizations, the public sector being part of it. My personal trajectory started with a study when I almost failed. Once I did almost 40 interviews with C-suite people from stock exchange and airports and public administrations and banks and German telecom board members, Morgan Stanley investment banks, asking them, what's the public value of your organization? And they were telling me great stories, narratives. How the hell could this be? We are amidst the financial crisis. It was in 2007, 2008. How can this be? And then I realized it's not why they are so alienated from the public, from mainstream, why they are so insane in a way, they are morally kind of deteriorated. It's not our take, but the question was, maybe it's the thinking style, maybe the way they look at the world. Because public is also a way of looking at the world. And then we realized there are different types of cognitive style. When I asked them, do you think the general public is also in line with your public value proposition? And most of them, you can see this, centering around this ideal point meant, yes, we are fully aligned. We do what they want. They get what they aspire for. Perfect alignment. How could this be? And then the solution was to come up with what we then call the cognitive style. There are many, even public administration, and you've experienced this if you deal with politicians and public sector leaders. They're like hedgehogs. They have a truth, and everything has to fit this truth. There is a true-false dichotomy. Not accepting that not everything is free of contradiction, that things are ambivalent. Everything has to be in the Excel sheet or has to fulfill the criteria of logics. And pub value is not just about logics, it's about a lot about feeling. That's why it's so interesting and it's also dangerous maybe even. And coding the data again, we could see that there are many of those people fully aligned in this ideal space are hedgehogs, and there are only a few foxes, accepting that the opposite of one truth is not necessarily a lie, accepting ambivalence, accepting diversity, accepting the world is rich. The tragedy, of course, hedgehogs get into power because they seem to have a clear vision, but foxes are more often right in predicting and forecasting things. It builds on the research by Philip Tedlock about super forecasters. The fox knows many things, but the hedgehog knows only one big thing. Goes back to an old saying by Archilochos, rejuvenated by Isaiah Berlin, Oxford philosopher, after World War II. And if this is true, it's a matter of psychological reality construction, how people interpret meanings, interpret things, and organize their experience. It makes sense to have a closer look how they construct the world. Public values also, of course, a social construction, not just a positivistic, it's their thing, we just have to measure and then it's there, but it has to be actively constructed. And this construction is supported by underlying need structures, let's say so, and we prepared a little video we may now watch in 8 minutes, how we combine all the thinking and translate it into psychological phenomenon.
Did you ever ponder the value of the company you work for, the civil service you consult, or the association you make donations to? Not in the financial sense, no. The question is, are those organizations valuable for society at large? And hereby valuable for you? To answer those questions, the University of St. Gallen developed a unique approach of public value. Its novelty is to embed management concepts like shareholder value, customer value, sustainability, corporate social responsibility, shared value, and stakeholder value within society as a whole. The concept of public value has its foundations in the idea that we humans are social animals. We are virtually interacting with each other all the time, together, within a group and in large organizations. Companies, the public service, and unions and associations build the ecosystem in which we live. That's why scholarship sees organizations as productive social systems. However, companies and organizations aren't just places where social interaction happens. They produce goods and services. They create jobs, pay taxes and social contributions, carry out legally fixed performance mandates, and unions and associations perform important tasks for our civil society. Thereby, organizations deeply impact our living environments, push or hold back progress, and coin our attitudes towards society, not least also through advertising. They constitute, as sociologists like to say, a reproduction mechanism of society with all its values, rules, and norms. Simply put, organizations make society and thus generate public value. But what exactly is public value? Public value means value creation towards the common good. That is, the added value and benefit of an organization for the well-being of each individual and the general public. In other words, the common good. It represents the values and norms which shape our way of living together and which everybody benefits from. Effects that go beyond mere economic transactions and that affect our living conditions are understood as negative or positive externalities by economists. Accordingly, organizations may destroy or create common good. This, however, depends on one's perspective. That's why the concept of common good or public value is unique. It is all about looking at organizations from the point of view of society. But how can we evaluate an organization from the standpoint of society? Psychology comes in handy here. It found 4 stable, basic human needs that build the motivational and emotional backbone for the evaluation of public value. 1. Each of us would like to understand the surrounding world and to have a target-oriented effect on it. 2. Each of us seeks recognition as a human being. 3. Each of us strives for sound social relationships. And 4. Each of us looks for positive and enjoyable experiences. These 4 elements result for every individual in a distinct pattern of needs, which organizations touch and influence with their performance and behaviors. Let's wrap it up. The concept of public value does not understand the value creation that an organization seeks to generate as a mere material thing, but as a motivational and emotional one that is anchored in our awareness. So, it's all about the images in our minds. But is this interesting for managers and politicians? Yes. Various organizations think about their contribution to the common good through their core businesses or performance mandate. Fresenius Medical Care, for example, wanted to know the social appraisal of their dialysis clinics. Swiss insurance company Mobiliar analyzed the potential effects of a corporate acquisition on their public value. The football club FC Bayern Munich examined the challenges of its growth strategy for its public value. And the German Federal Employment Agency, one of Europe's biggest civil services, tried to find out which contribution to the common good legitimizes its reason of being. Now, how exactly were these organizations able to measure their contribution to the common good? The University of St. Gallen developed 2 methods to analyze public value. Both focus on the 4 basic human needs. 1. The Public Value Scorecard. 2. The Public Value Atlas. The Public Value Scorecard focuses on 5 questions. 1. Is it profitable? 2. Is it useful? 3. Is it decent? 4. Is it politically acceptable? And 5. Is it a positive experience? Keeping these 5 questions in mind when making management decisions allows us to think beyond the profitability of the company and take into account the 4 basic human needs. Not everything always fits neatly, however. A management's initiative, for example, could be profitable and useful, but at the same time neither decent nor politically acceptable. It also may be legal, but not legitimate yet. The second method is termed the Public Value Atlas. In this case, the general public is directly asked what public value an organization creates. Similar to customer surveys, it is possible to gather management information at the heartbeat of society. An organization is able to better understand for what it is esteemed for and for what it isn't, if its actions are perceived as legitimate, and if its efforts have a positive impact on the public. This is all about advertising and political marketing, you say. At the core of the Public Value Atlas lays the assumption that sooner or later, empty promises won't hold. Public value is what the public values. Put simply, public value is a matter of attitude, and the attitude of all of us determines how valuable the activity of an organization is. The public value approach tells us that an organization always acts meaningfully whenever it gets appreciated by the public, and thus whenever it contributes to a functioning society. It helps to scrutinize management decisions against their compatibility with the common good. It fosters a new understanding of value creation that combines hard and soft factors, and it makes it possible to evaluate the performance of an organization in a new way. Public value matters for all of us, management, society, and you.
Yeah, this was a nutshell, 8 minutes. Sociology, philosophy, some maybe bold statements in it. We did this almost 10 years ago, this video. In those times, not having in mind the relationship between public value and populism, not having in mind a rollback in terms of climate change initiative, didn't have this in mind. It was a different time. It was after the financial crisis, establishing the construct. I still feel that it conveys the essence of what our approach entails, and it also said at one point we have to combine the soft and hard factors, the subjective and objective maybe, and I hope we can discuss this a little bit further also today. And I hope you see Mark on the second picture. Mark, the first generation of public value researchers, now hands over to us, the second generation, and also to you, then even the third generation, to do nothing less but to reinvent the notion of value creation. It might be a giant task, but it's nothing less to open up the Pandora's box of let subjectivity meet objectivity, to confront ourselves with the people, whatever that means, to kind of, yes, let's put it this way, next step of capitalism. To kind of discuss in new framings, new words, what it means to save our democracy and our freedom. But to put it on this way, public value per se is not the goal for me. For me, it's about freedom, enabling to flourish in community. Public value per se is not, it's a means, let's say, and an end. But it's not only an end, it's also a means. It's both. It's a means and an end. And the end is to flourish in community, to have freedom in a community where you can take your chances, your life chances seriously, and you have access to education, to fresh water, to fresh air, and this kind of enabling condition. Public value is an enabling condition. That's the underlying idea. And if so, we have, of course, also to relate to definitions, and it's the only wordy slide. And if you read this through, it's a bit longish maybe. Public value is value for the public. Value for the public is the result of how basic human needs, groups and society as a whole are influenced in relation. As you said, public value is created in relations. It's relative because it's a matter of relating to each other. It's also relative in terms of culture. In China, public value is different than in North Korea, Northern Italy, or Northern Germany, of course. Public value is universal because all people across the world have maybe similar basic needs, but they have different ways to play it out, to address those needs. And that's the idea alongside, so it's public value drawn from experiences with the public, with an agency, with a soccer club, with a church. It's a matter of relating to each other. So value is found not in the subject, the evaluator, nor in the object being evaluated, but it's in between. It's a relationship. That's why we need subjective and objective measures together. And it needs emotion, yes. It's because it's only reproduced in emotional, motivational state. This is kind of, you say, it's too psychological for some of you, maybe you say. But for us, it's the way to address this relationship between individual and society. And one of our backbones is needs theory. Is needs theory to say individual needs translate into value, collective value. Collective value is grounded in basic needs. Of course, there's a long way of attachment need of a baby to the common good. But the mediator or the mechanism in between is we obviously have in our family, in our genetic program, learned and acquired in the sense of belongingness. This translates into solidarity, into social cohesion, and all those values of our civilization are somehow rooted in our human psyche. Our human psyche is the basis for. We try to relate this micro with the macro level. We try to relate this positive self-worth, the need of being acknowledged, dignity, respect, with the idea of moral values, of equity, for example. or we relate this need for belonging with social peace. And these days it's not just social, it's real peace, which is threatened. We relate this also to just those four, because there are not more than four needs necessary to explain the whole stuff. Like a Lego system, you have little stones, you build complex architectures, but you can always trace them back to those four basic needs. At least this is my take on a useful framing and useful conceptualizing how the human psyche develops desires, needs, instincts, passions. My colleague he's passionate about passion. He's a passion researcher, and this translates from the micro to the macro, back and forth. It's complicated, but that's the idea of how human basic needs form the basis for values, and then, of course, public values. Then we did a couple of papers connecting to things like job characteristics model, it's always publications behind with doctoral students, what motivates people to go to work. What does it mean for happiness if public institutions create public value? What does it mean for employee engagement? What does it mean these days for organizational citizenship behavior, and so on and so forth? Our current paper almost, I hope gets published soon in PMR, how public value and flow relate to each other. And there are a couple of things. We, in the meantime, also developed a scale. If you introduce a new construct, you only survive with a scale, because otherwise it's not getting used in research, but a scale is necessary for survival of a construct, as I feel. It took us 10 years, by the way, to develop a public value scale. And we number of things also with employer attractiveness, employability things of how employers present their brand to the market. Papers over papers over papers to establish how public value thinking, public value orientation affects people at the workplace. This is interesting for HR people, but it's also interesting for those who evaluate organizations, cultures, in transformation projects, change management projects, how public value investment pays off at the employee level. And then we started also to analyze with public value scorecard and so on, the organizational culture. With the Gemeinwohl Atlas already mentioned, we came up with a ranking. In Germany, the firefighters are first and Marlboro last. We compare Deutsche Bank with Bayern Munich, of course, with public and private institutions, standing the critique that how can you compare the Red Cross with Deutsche Bank? Of course we can, because following Drucker, every organization performs a role, contributes to people's happiness, contributes to people's perception of society, so it's not so super unfair to compare Deutsche Bank to Red Cross. Deutsche Bank, of course, did not like it, but the pages, also in English, show this ranking with huge public attention. Even in quiz shows, it's used to ask people for the 500 euro question, who is first and second. So it also made a step to the popular culture. In entertainment, they use this as infotainment, this ranking. We did in Switzerland 4 times, in Germany 2 times, in Japan, our latest also 1 time, and hopefully, if we get the funding again, in Germany, maybe one day together in Italy, or G7 maybe. I promise you, this is huge. It gets to the prime news, because people want to know where they are in rankings, even if it's not the most scientific part to talk about rankings, but journalists and managers like rankings. It's the way it is. I had a hard time to accept, but now I accepted this. For the ones who want a bit deeper, we have the scorecard. You already saw this in the video, translating the value into 4 dimensions, chances and risks for investments, for startups, for initiatives, the utilitarian instrumental, the moral ethical, political social, hedonistic aesthetic, and also the profitability dimension, which is not a separate, but it's a subcategory of the instrumental. We may discuss this, but for time reasons, I just go over this part why from 4 we go to 5. I don't think it's a theoretical contradiction. It's a tactical move in our public value theory to also include the money dimension, the economic dimension in a scorecard like this. Many institutions apply this now or were in projects with us, not just Bayern Munich, you saw in the movie, Fresenius Medical Care or Labor Agency, but also a couple of banks, insurance companies, Goethe Institute, you may know. And in Leipzig, at our place, we also did this and started a round table. We are now issuing what we call a public value parliament. It's not questioning the representative democracy. It's not a shadow parliament, but it's a social experiment how we can involve citizens in public value creation next to the parliament. Our mayor is part of the movement, so it's not anti-establishment, it's with the establishment. And those kind of studies help to initiate round tables, to bring this, to transfer this from lecture hall to city hall or to boardrooms. And studies like this are door openers. I know we may run out of time a bit for this intro. I would love to lecture a semester or so, because it takes time to translate all this in not in an hour or so, but it takes longer. I want to end with a few on startups and a few on what I said, how to reconcile the objective and the subjective. In the startup world, it says, after having analyzed 1,000 and having finalists, and the finalists only, public value rich finalists, have quite a high survival rate, higher than the average. So it makes sense to invest early on in public value because you have a better survival chance. This is the bottom line. Bearing in mind that our public value startups are both unicorns and zebras. Of course, we welcome zebras, but we also welcome unicorns if they are prepared to have this public value analysis. It's not necessarily a contradiction being a unicorn and public value rich. It's a kind of a super zebra, black and white. That's how we translate this into the world of our entrepreneurial ecosystem. But maybe the most important message of this talk is the one: how could we perhaps together think about this psychological phenomenon, social phenomenon, and having hard indicators. And not say this is too soft, that's too hard, but to think this in an integral world. And my take on this is we need together not a meta theory, but a theory of value dynamics. How values evolve over time, become crystallized as if they were eternal truths, then they disappear again. Like an evolutionary process of competing values with each other, socialism, capitalism, private property, collective property, this kind of values are all product of civilization. If we agree on this, there's not just objective like gravity or other physical forces, but it's social construction. And sometimes they appear as if they were objective as a given, but at a closer look, they are also matters of our culture. And how to really consider this fragile, this fluid, and this more put in stone relationship, we suggest synergetics. It's, to me, the most advanced, even in terms of mathematics, the most advanced statistics model on how to talk about how social phenomena come into place, stay, and disappear. It's far beyond the mechanistic worldview. It says there's maybe a microscopic chaos even, and things in the parliament or people interact with stakeholders, and something is emerging that's called, yesterday we talked about the political will, a decision to focus on education, the focus on environment. And then it's turned into what its inventor, Hermann Haken, called an order parameter. It emerges out of a self-organized interaction. You cannot predict elections, you cannot predict consumer behavior, but at some points there are variables, what he calls order parameters, emerging, not a linear way, but emerging. And once they are there, they help to organize. He even used the term, which I don't really like, enslave the system. It's like a pattern, you see it on the right-hand side, feeding back on the micro level. It's not a simple causation, it's rather a circular causality. The causes repeat themselves by a process of feed forward and feedback. But the system itself can break down. It's not a given. So KPIs change over time. People behave differently. Different actions lead to different structures. And this kind of interaction is framed in what is called synergetics. You have lots of mathematics, evolutionary equations, if you like, Fokker-Blank equations, if you like. And this circular causality idea, to me, helps us to talk about things that are almost frozen, objective, and are less objective, only subjective. What used to be subjective turns into objective measures, and we have a hard time to explain and advertise why certain ideas, let's say from Brussels, should be relevant for me. So it's a backward translation from what has been emerged to help people find orientation maybe, or to attach positively. There's a huge tradition in self-organization theory, in chaos theory. And I take this take, and I guess Clemens shares this, we need a value theory, independent from our disciplines, to understand dynamics. This is the way forward, what I would suggest, or we would suggest, to integrate subjective and objective. What used to be subjective becomes objective, and so on. This is circular dynamic, circular causality. Lots has been published. We also published a couple of papers. There are principles of instability, critical distance, and so on, historical past dependencies. There's a huge part, and this is the suggestion, my gift, my present, our present to this group. Let's develop together public value theory with this idea of dynamics based on self-organization theory. It used to be first in physics, then it traveled to social science, and Luca, we will also have a very prominent speaker in Lisbon talking to us how self-organization and public value relate to each other in the making of cities. The 21st century cannot rely on mechanistic theories. It has to be dynamic, to integrate chaos, to integrate tipping points. The whole language of tipping points, chaos, is behind this model. And that could be something where Ferrara and Leipzig go forward together. To conclude, what started as a very normative theory, and this is what Mark Moore said in his book, is now split into different schools, let's say, with the most promising Italian arm, with the most promising Italian school, let's say so. What started in the public sector is now present in all sectors. And if I look at reviews from our papers, where commentators and reviewers send us feedback, they no longer criticize the theory part. I told you, 15 years ago, nobody wanted to publish with me. Nobody. And reviewers had a hard time. What is public value? Do we need this? Now criticize more the methods part, the statistics part maybe, or the conclusions part or whatever. But obviously they got accommodated to public value as a construct they cannot simply deny. So while the construct has been established, we need now more integration. That's maybe the next step, and also more process orientation. We have cross-sectional data, but process data, this is maybe the next step to make public value stick It only survives if we do it, otherwise it will die out as many fashions die out. But I think there's a reason for being that this child on the giant of shoulders of giants has to say in the 21st century. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for this very deep, insightful speech, not only presenting a bit of history, from where you come from, your first encounter with Mike Moore, your consulting activity, but also the future of public value. And I took several notes. I'm not going through them all because we are strict on time, but just wanted to of course, pinpoint some, I think, relevant aspect that is being raised, and of course, giving a preliminary answer to your question that you provocatively put to us, and that is, of course, yes. As a Center for Public Value, we are now ready to move to the next step in our strategy. We, together with my friend and colleague Enrico De Gagliardo, we started trying to build, first of all, a community within Italy. And I think we have several achievements on that. So public value now in Italy is a common word, and everybody now think is relevant, and as also the ministries and our norms consider public value. I think now it's time to go beyond Italy and start to make the research that we developed so far to be more integrated, and to then engage in a more international setting. And also, I think what you pinpointed very well is that public value is not just something that pertains public sector organizations, but private firms, not-for-profit organizations, different societal institutions have their role in order to co-produce, in order to also define what public value is and how can be produced, and of course what we are also interested how we can measure public value. And therefore I think your speech is a wonderful opening for also and provided a lot of food for thought to all of us, particularly to our younger scholars that very soon will present some of example of research that we are developing the research center. Have several other points that maybe over lunch in the afternoon, because what it came to my mind is how also can we avoid what I defined public value appropriation. You know, that is one of the risks. You mentioned populism, but we are all seeing how things can change very rapidly. So I'm not talking about recent event, but very rapidly, and so something that we consider has a value in society now becomes not a value anymore, and just for a political decision driven by what we can call populism, or we can call other different ways. So, and I think we have a role on this. We have a role not only providing methodologies, tools that can be used to measure, to manage public value, but also to provide lenses to avoid that public value can be appropriated, and then political decisions can be justified for the sake of some value that someone has decided that is a public value or a new value to be achieved. But I don't want to take additional time. The agenda is very, very dense, and I leave the word again to Luca, and I want to thank Timo as well as Clemens for being with us, and is going to be for our research center. That's at least the hope, but as I said, our strategy, the first of several other moments open to the international community, where we engage in order to have a cross-dissemination and a cross-fertilization of what we are doing. So thank you once again, and I leave the word to Luca. Thank you.
Thank you, Rico, and thank you, Timo, for the marvelous speech, and thank you also, Clemens, for being here. And for the second part of today, we are going to also give the stage to our young researcher. And many topics came in my mind during your speech, Timo, because I think that sometimes we think public value just as the increasing of well-being that we can maybe measure or maybe we can observe. But sometimes it's also how we feel well-being, right? So how we feel, if well-being is increased or not, how we feel ourselves happy. And this is also a risk, as we said before, of public value appropriation, of populism, of totalitarian regimes that may take power. So I think that it is also interesting to keep a sort of tension between the two perspectives. So on my one hand, we need to be happy in the community that we are living in, and the other hand, we need to keep constructively criticize the well-being that we are in. And this is very important to me, because I think that's also another topic that you mentioned in the last part of your speech, is to build a new theory, a new beta theory, right? So to basically a theory of a dynamic theory that builds on this tension between the two perspectives. And I think it's our responsibility to indicate the correct way to build this correct tension in order to, yes, create well-being, measure well-being, but also criticize if we are in a fair well-being for all of us, for all our communities. So I think that now I'm going to give the floor to our three research young scholars, and then, of course, we can open the discussion to the audience. And we have basically three brief abstracts that we are going to be presented. And the first one is about public value reporting. So how we can vehiculate all our information about what public value is, and so how we can visualize and judge also the public value created. Another one topic, it's very important, is crisis management. So what's the role of public value in crisis management? And the last one, but not least, also how can we measure public value in an objective but also in a subjective way to keep this tension alive? So I think that I go through, I give the word to Anna Laura Francesconi, the first speech of today. And Anna Laura has also some questions to open questions to the audience. Also, Francesco will go second, and Daniele will go third. Go on. Here, Laura, here the microphone.
Thank you.
I can give you the slides.
Thank you. And thank you, Professor Menon and Dr. Sogin. I don't know if is the correct pronunciation, but sorry for that. And it's a very interesting speech and discussion about the inquadration of the public value. My main topic of research is related to non-financial disclosure for public value accountability in the public sector organization. So how we could see from your speech, public value, the research on the public value has established the crucial role to guide the action of organization to achieve a better, best performance, sustainable and multidimensional. So from this sustainable perspective highlights the importance and the responsibility of public sector organization to achieve a public value that is recognized by the societies through the implementation of the participatory processes that allows to recognize and to assess the agreement or the disagreement about the public value created by the organization. So in this perspective, the non-financial disclosure could represent an innovative and valuable tool to improve the communication with the societies, to a better dialogue with the stakeholders, and also to satisfy their expectation and needs and improve the communication and the expectation. So from this point of view is essential because the non-financial disclosure is essential because it allows to communicate financial and financial disclosure to various stakeholders, and also because it allows to implement improve the involvement of different stakeholders through a process of co-creation, co-communication, co-reporting of the public value generated. So in this topic of research, two main innovative areas of research are arising alongside the most traditional research topics that is focused on the quality, the extended, and the type of the non-financial disclosure published by the public sector organization. In particular, the first research area is related and aims to verify how the non-financial disclosure influences the culture, the processes, and the activities of the public sector organization, and also analyze and understand how external stakeholders could be more involved, engaged in the processes for the elaboration of this document. In this way, we have the opportunity to improve the communication and understand the real expectation and the needs of the stakeholders. And the second main areas of research is related or aims to analyze the link between non-financial disclosure and the accountability of multidimensional impacts for the creation of public value. Because it's important, this topic or this area of research, because the actual standard and frameworks present some limitation about the measurement of the public value, so the multidimensional impacts. So from this perspective, different frameworks try to extend it or improve this aspect, propose an innovative and methodological innovative way to measure and integrate the actual frameworks that is presented in the national and international context. So from these 2 points of view on these two topics, I would like to discuss with you about this future's evolution of the public value for non-financial disclosure. In particular, the first topic is related to the organizational processes and culture. And I would like to know, if possible, on the basis of your experience, what could be the key organizational characteristic and managerial implication that could facilitate the application, the introduction of financial disclosure in the public sector organization and also maybe in the private organization. And in the second topic is related to the subjective perspective of public value, because in this moment the engagement of the different stakeholders is only on first stage, because we sometimes the organization have difficult in identify the method, the way that they could involve the stakeholders. So on the basis of your experience, I would like to ask you, how do you think is a best method, way to involve the stakeholder, and in which phases of the elaboration of the non-financial disclosure we could involve the stakeholder, for example, in the definition of the strategies, sustainability strategies, in the definition of the key performance measurement for the evaluation of the multidimensional impacts, or maybe in the way that we could measure in a subjective way this performance. And the last is related to very innovative challenges about the non-financial disclosure and the artificial intelligence, because artificial intelligence represents a very great opportunity for innovative the public administration. So how do you think this new tool could help the introduction and the elaboration of financial disclosure? Thanks.
Thank you, Laura. Timo, if you want to reply, also Clemens, if you want to take.
If you'd like to start, please.
Yeah, maybe some key organizational characteristics that I could imagine that kind of play a role would be kind of the leadership style that they show, and especially also some kind of leadership characteristics. So overall, maybe the organizational or perceived organizational purpose, kind of is it contributing to the common good or not? And I would also suggest maybe looking at, and this is also something that we kind of empirically found was the individual attitudes, or you can either kind of also see it as, but this is not kind of an organizational characteristic per se, but the individual attitudes, for example, of the top management teams or of team members, and even aggregated it, and role or kind of attitudes that play a role in this are, for example, generativity, attitudes towards future generations. They are kind of validated scales and so on. And this means that you want to fulfill kind of a need of giving something back, or even build something that outlasts yourself. This kind of for the first question.
May I add the legal perspective? I mean, Europe, Brussels said companies have to do a lot. There's ESG, there's this social taxonomy, and so on and so forth, and they don't like it. Now we have this omnibus legislation from Brussels. For the private sector, they are also feel this as a burden, yet another report, and so on. And what we felt was, when we did the study publicly at cross points, that employers use publicly as signaling for future hires. It makes a difference if this company signals credibly to the market, to young talent. We engage, we take public value seriously. At least for those young employees who are purpose-driven and want to make a difference, to get the talent, the best talent. This might be a very expensive advice, would be do a public value atlas and your phone will ring. When we came up with this idea in Switzerland to do a public value atlas, was because I was a bit tired to take the phone and ask, would you like to fund the project? Maybe do a presentation in Zurich somewhere. No, maybe not, next year. Okay, now let's turn it. Do something and publish it. And then they came on a talk. And now they start realizing about the positive effects we could show with work engagement, happiness, this time flow, and so on and so forth. It matters for employees. It also matters to stock markets. We have a PhD study able to show that the S&P 500 in the United States, in the long run, single stock-based and portfolio-based public value pays off. Of course, there are studies saying completely opposite, but we could show it empirically that it works. We could also show, there was another doctoral study, that in a corporate communication, once they communicate this, they obviously have a correlation between communication and cost of capital, getting loans from banks. So there are also hard fact consequences, not just well-being of employees. And as Clement said, I would just underscore that it depends on leadership, whether they embrace it or not. Maybe if I go on to the question too, or can we also involve the audience? Or, I mean, you are the...
Yeah, if you like to add something, of course you're most welcome. So, are there any hints or suggestions from the audience? No, not yet. Okay, so this is very intriguing, I think, and yeah, maybe leadership. It's I was thinking about how to stimulate the private sector, for example, to think about public value, and yeah, leadership.
Do an atlas, and they will ring your phone. Your mobile doesn't stand still anymore.
It's yeah, I think it's always a matter of culture. So if culture is widespread, maybe they can start thinking about public value and thinking about the role that public value can have in their businesses as well as for the society, of course. Okay. Thank you so much, Laura. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, I give the floor to Francesco Muratore. Now another topic very important, which is crisis management and public value.
Yes, I'm going to present myself. I'm Francesco Muratore, PhD student in regulation, management and law in public sector organization. And today I will discuss about the possible relation between crisis management and public value. Today we all know that we live in a global context characterized by different type of crises, financial crisis, environmental crisis, etc. So crisis management become not only important but essential for make a good and efficient response to crisis situations. Previous studies have already highlighted a dependency between administrative tradition and crisis responses. And what emerged is that during a moment of crisis, the central government tried to take power from local governments to centralize the decision-making. So this produced less collaboration than expected, not only between central governments and local governments, so different level of governments, but also between public sector, citizens, and other stakeholders. So we can ask if public value could represent a central guide for the crisis management activities to foster a better collaboration between different entities and different stakeholders and the public sector. A central aspect of this possible aim of research is how to govern crisis management to co-creation of public value during a moment of crisis. So a useful instrument to govern crisis, to co-create public value, could be the public value collaborative governance, which is a model that combines elements of public value governance with strategies of collaboration and participation between different types of organization and stakeholders. From this perspective, it's possible to identify these innovative research areas, and we can resume these three topics on a single focus, that is to understand if public value, placed at the center of crisis management strategies, can positively influence response and recovery activities, turning emergencies into opportunities for growth and renewal towards collaborative governance. So, I want to ask to our guests, Professor Maynard and Dr. Sangen, three questions. The first is if can public value become the new incentive for collaboration between institutions, citizens, and stakeholders? If can the centrality of public value in crisis situations strengthen trust between institutions, citizens, and stakeholders? At least, what tools and collaborative governance mechanism could be developed and enhanced to integrate the co-creation of public value into crisis management? Thank you.
Thank you, Francesco. If I may respond also for your PhD project and your project, Enrico and Luca, we may even start somehow to co-supervise. Why not? I might also serve as second reviewer if you like. It's just an invitation. I would argue the reason for being public value so interesting and attractive is crisis. Because value philosophy is crisis philosophy. Values emerge in crisis when you're at crossroads, when you don't know what the next step could look like. We are kind of in a more existentialist idea. We have to say what is important. What are our priorities? If you would live in uncontested times with no crisis, financial, environmental, as you say, or democratic crisis, the public value discourse would not be so super attractive. It's attractive because there are crises. Maybe in 20 years' time, we have other public value challenges. There's no reason to believe the crisis will go away. But value and crisis to me belong together because it's not so super important to talk about what I want, but how to cope with complexity, how to cope with uncertainty. This is the reason why public value is so important. If we would be able to cognitively or in a rational way to solve the problems, we don't need values. They are subjective, they are dirty. So many noise in the models, emotions, so subjective, so psychological. If we would know the solution, we don't need values. We only need values in times of uncertainty. And if this is the starting point, this relation, public value does not need to be forced to say public value should be the new guiding star. I would always keep it like an invitation. Public value is an invitation. It's not something forcing on people. You just have to wait. They will come. Why? Because people look for things which unite us. You said you used the term cooperation. We need more cooperation than competition. We need, of course, both. But to establish this idea, what unites us, we need an idea what this could be. In public is a lens, or as it was this kaleidoscopic phenomenon. To make this as a speaking device to talk about relevant. And I remember when we meet at our round table, we have entrepreneurs, we have politicians, we have people from churches, from universities. They all have different access to the term public value. But we are far beyond stakeholder, because stakeholder management is focusing on your interests and my interests and how to find a compromise. Public value is another level. How can I contribute to something bigger than myself? How can we make a difference on the collective? That's why it's not just a rhetoric or a performance narrative or some normative something, but a way to have this language to articulate this. So you don't need to force people in this public value mode. It will come, my idea or my experience, almost naturally. It's also maybe the secret of the Public Value Festival in Lisbon. People come because they have very different avenues how to talk about, from the arts, from sports, from architecture, from city planning this year. But they all have the idea there must be something transcending our own existence. You don't need to be religious. You have not to believe in God. But if you say there's something beyond myself, you naturally end up with some sort of public value thinking, in particular in crisis. To me, trust is not so important. We are not trust researchers. Trust might be a complementary or the other side of the coin. Trust as a necessary condition for public value, but not sufficient one. They are not mutually exclusive, but it's also a different discourse. Personally, I would not invest too much time in trust research. I don't know whether trust researchers here in the room don't feel offended. In the public value discourse, we don't have too many trust discussions. Or maybe for your dissertation, it's a starting point to find a research gap, to say, let's talk more about trust in public. I'm a bystander of the trust discourse. And the tools for the co-creation, you have the pyramid, we have the scorecard. We have now 5 different versions of the scorecard. And to me, I don't think we lack tools. We lack good application of tools. And maybe yours, the public value accounting or public value reporting, in dissertation, you may not necessarily, or you develop new tools, but do empirical studies how tools already existing are applied and to evaluate, to show the effect of those tools. Be my take on this. The first thoughts.
Yeah, also add kind of a psychological perspective also on this, or an individual perspective. Since you always kind of refer to public value as a somewhat relational concept, I would also argue that public value has another effect on crisis management from an individual point, which kind of escalates then upwards. And I would say that given kind of that public value also fosters organizational identification, for example, you rather perceive yourself as, or you have this oneness with the organization, this is why you also put more effort into it. Or you have kind of the creation of positive experience, positive emotions, which kind of then translates, according to the broadened and build theory, to building up resources like, for example, persistence, grit, creativity, and so on. So this could also be another way also of framing how public value could kind of contribute to crisis management via an individual level that kind of translates via, for example, synergetics to an organizational perspective. And why is the organization kind of good in coping with crisis? Because also the organization has an effect on the individual experience, or an effect of the experience of the individual working in the organization. This could be via work engagement, positive emotions, organizational identification, and so on, because people have this natural tendency of having a positive self-view or positive self-concept, and then there are effects like basking in reflected glory, while we try to identify with scoring football clubs and so on. Maybe this could also be another way also to frame PV in relation to crisis management. Yeah, and also the trust concept is kind of, it's very kind of mixed up in research. I don't know whether with effect heuristics and so on, and different kind of shades of trust. So it's a hard concept, I would say so.
May I add one thought? I dare to say we are not under-tooled, we are under-evaluated. There are already tools. Maybe it's also for your academic. If you move to consultancy, of course you develop tools all the day, 2x2 metrics and things. Of course, it's what you get paid for. to me, from a scientific point of view, tools are the very last part in the chain. Maybe it's already the achievement to reinterpret existing tools. They also reflect some sort of public value, but maybe in a different way. So don't look, as advice maybe, don't know whether, who is the advisor or the supervisor? Don't know if it contradicts you, I don't know, or you. I would not spend too much time in tool development per se, because tools to me are language games. There are fashions, there are kind of, this is more the consulting industry. The scientific contribution could be also a critical reflection of existing tools. You don't need to find this research gap. If you contribute either 3 papers or monography, I don't know what the style is at your school, paper style, paper style. Maybe, Enrico, Luca, we should also set up an own journal, a public value journal, and you can publish in our own journal. Of course, to get it public, it's either theory or method or empirical data. And I think, it's my idea, we lack good process data, not necessarily develop new tools. That would be my take. I don't know, it's encouraging or discouraging. But great data, longitudinal data, this is missing.
Thank you so much, Timo Clemens. Of course, thank you so much, Francesco. And last but not least, Daniele Mantegna. Here we are, Daniele. The floor is yours.
Thank you. I will start by, by presenting myself. I'm Daniele Mantegna, PhD student, like Francesco. I would like to discuss the importance of the subjective perspective among the measurement of public value and also the diffusion of public value, because I find that historically public value is something that is always based on objective metrics, till the beginning at least, and only during this period, this recent period, we have introduced a new subjective perspective, perspective that is very important to understand why public value and measurement could affect maybe the people, the citizens and the stakeholders in this perspective. So the objective perspective was introduced by our professor at the beginning, and of course by you also, was composed by different dimensions of public value. Internal public value, that is about health of resources, for example, for the public administration itself, and also performance, risk management, for example, something that is internal. Then we have the sector public value, also in the objective perspective, of course, that analyzed a sector, a specific sector of maybe augmented well-being for stakeholders, public administration, and the external PV that is the effect on the multidimensional well-being. Public value also can be presented in a broader way, where better internal resources, for example, can direct and boost external outcomes. However, we have the subjective perspective, where the keywords in this case is, for me, in my opinion, sharing. Sharing is a keyword because thanks to this new subjective perspective, we can also add to measurement of the public value a lot of dimensions. For example, you also said, Timo, Professor Maynard, that PV is a psychological phenomenon, is a multidimensional phenomenon. So it must be go like forward these objective metrics and focuses on the subjective perspective. So according to the subjective perspective, we have also different types of public value, recognized public values. So we have a lot of values in this sense. And this that I want you to show is an image, a very wonderful image in my opinion, that can represent, emphasize and synthesize what is the actual work we are going through for the objective perspective and subjective perspective, and synthesize and emphasize also the complexity of this study. So the main research question I have in this research is how we can make these two perspectives interact one another, and in an engaging way, more engaging way with the stakeholders, and also measure public value, create public value throughout co-process method, maybe, and involve citizens and stakeholders not only in a creation of public value, but also in a measurement of public value. So, going forward, I want to do these three questions to you. The first one is the subjective perspective actually taken into consideration from actual public administration policies? What effect can the objective quantification have on public value citizens and stakeholders? And then, maybe how can maybe a close integration between these two perspectives, like one in quantification, for example, can be maybe better for a subjective perspective throughout a co-process or for a broader maybe dissemination or measurement of public value. So thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Daniele. Yeah.
First of all, thank you, Daniele. You also have exciting, huge topics, and I really wish you can pursue this for a long, long time, because really big questions. And what do you request? I think what you said also in the beginning, it was also part of the presentation, our presentation, to deal with this subject-object divide, subjective-objective. And to me, this problem is not to be solved on this level, but on the meta, as you also said, on a kind of theory of values, how values become objective and subjective. To me, they become subjective once they are internalized, part of the emotional, affective, motivational system. I hold this value because I was trained, or my mother told me so, and I have a positive relation, or my family, or whatever kind of socializing environment. And they get externalized once I start to bring this value to life in my talks, in my research, or they even crystallize then in certain structures. And this going back and forth, subject, objective, getting internalized, externalized. Once they get externalized, they can become objective as if they are independent from my own feelings. Yes, they are then in KPIs, for example. But this again part of negotiation can become fluid again. And to me, synergetics is an example, or to me the best, the most promising currently in those self-organization sphere, to come to terms with this divide, which is not really in the divide, but something else. And so we need social theory to explain the phenomenon, how dynamics of values establish what seems to be objective, and again has to be internalized back and forth. to your first question, is this subjective perspective taken into account? Yes and no. They do employee surveys, employee engagement forums, or they do citizen surveys. And some we work with have started to integrate public value questions in their employee surveys and in their citizen surveys. The Federal Labor Agency, also mentioned in the video, is now considering, they had previously other items from us, but now considering the public value promoter score I presented in the beginning, integrate in the citizen surveys. So they use this as data, controlling data. There's still a long way to go, but it's there, it's measurable, so it's not a question of development. The second question, what effect can the objective quantification of public value have on this subjective? If there's an objective measurement, let's say, for example, reduction of unemployment by such percentage. The question we had for the Federal Labor Agency is that once we fulfill this mandate, it's already a public value. And I said, no. Because if people do not appreciate what you think is a public value, then it's not a public value, because public values are the public values. So at least in Germany, our institutions suffer from not getting the appreciation they expect for their performance, and public administration thought, until recently, if we fulfill our legal mandate, that's enough. The rest is marketing. It's not. Public value is a matter of deliberation, so you have to involve the people and translate why this reduction of unemployment is a public value, which of course needs some investment to bring people into jobs and so on. If this is not translated, they wonder, in particular the Federal Labor Agency is very, very low in the public value atlas in Germany, very low. For me, it's heartbreaking almost, because I love this institution. It's heartbreaking to see that this institution has very low public value appreciation in the public. Although they pretend we create a lot of objective public value, but the people, they don't see it. This is where it gets interesting, where the tension comes into play. And this co-creating, integrating stuff, to me, we try in Leipzig currently the public value parliament, where we generate money from citizens for citizens, and they decide how to spend it. So we combine objective resource budgets with allocation. It's more than participatory budgeting. It's a new type of citizen engagement. I don't know whether it fails, but it's our take on co-creation.
I've rather some kind of questions. So how do you measure kind of the subjective perspective, and even kind of when then talking about integrating those two perspectives, how is it if they are conflicting? What is kind of what overweighs, so to say? Rather questions I have in mind.
Yeah, maybe the last question you're referring. So, not they are in conflict one another, but I must I want to say that what is the impact? Okay, in the third question of the objective quantification on the subjective perspective. If we can put together and see if there is an interaction, maybe the objective quantification maybe can lead the perspective, the subjective perspective in another way, and so. Yeah.
I mean, in this case of labor agency, it's so super clear that without their performance and their budget is 130 billion. It's almost 25% of the German entire budget they spend for those measures. They save social peace in a dimension unbelievable. Still, the population saying no. people say we don't see this. And this, maybe it's a perception gap. You have to close to translate this. And definitely a populist answer is not the public value answer. But right answers, what does it mean? Do press conference with emotions? They are statistic people, and statistic people, they might be very emotional, but not in their work. Number crunchers. And sometimes it sounds a bit not so engaging to just talk about numbers, but give life to numbers in a way which is responsible without becoming populist. This is the razor's edge to work on. And maybe your research could contribute about also for communication strategies.
Yeah. Maybe, yeah. Thank you.
Could be.
Yeah, it was just to add something. Yeah, I was thinking about the role of leadership, right, in building up a good subjective perspective, if you will, on public value, right? Also in fostering the using of maybe tools in order to assess the objective one, but also to a leadership that be exerted in a good way, just to build a good subjective perspective, but also to come to bring people in the discussion and to make them participate in what they think public value is, how they value public value because they are the public. And yes, I think it's for future researchers an intriguing perspective that should be also investigated thoroughly. Yeah. So if you have some hints about this role of leadership in the objective perspective and subjective one.
Definitely, and hopefully we have leaders not only being hedgehogs but also foxes.
Yeah.
It starts with the hiring of the right people. If they see it, and maybe you are the next generation, future leaders. And public value is messy. It's kaleidoscopic. I use the term of the day. It's contradiction. It's not a nice concept. It hurts. Public value hurts because moral values can be in contrast to political values. But not just an empty category. It's a category with structure. And we suggest 4 or 5 dimensions, and along those dimensions, it's also a fight. And you never know what's going to happen next. We had a debate initiated by Mark Preble, and that was a special issue of administration and society. And we argue that the public value proposition, you never know. It's a promise. It's an hypothesis. And public value oftentimes is only after the fact, whether it's realized, whether you get appreciation. It's an experiment. So doing public value management to me is being both not timid, but being humble. At the same time courageous. And to be both courageous and humble, this to me is the way forward in leadership education, to have those people who see also the danger of public value. It's so easy to turn it into a populist strategy, to promise people things you cannot really know, to just pretend. But without promises, how can you motivate? And this is the struggle, being both humble and courageous at the same time. And this is leadership quality, hopefully, for the 21st century. We see more of those people having this mental complexity to see contradiction and paradox not as a threat, but as a chance.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Timo. Thank you, Daniele. I invite you. Very good presentation. I invite Enrico to the floor for the wrap-up session. Some closing remarks.
Yeah, first of all, I would like to thank you, our young researcher, PhD student in particular. They were, at the challenge, to briefly summarize their research topic and posing questions. So, congratulations, we did a great job, and thank you to Timo and Clemens for engaging with them. I think this is important to create this community, engaging community made of young scholars as well as tenured one. And wrapping up about what has been already mentioned, but I would like to make some reflection based on what Timo Maynard said at the beginning about the fact that public value has always been there, and there were the need of someone of trying to make it visible, and that while many managerial fashions or words may pass, as you show, or there may be some too technical words to be used, public value is here to stay in a way or another. And to that extent, moving to the other aspect, that public value is not just a public sector monopoly. So it's not just something that pertains public sector organization, but needs governance of public-private profit. And moving from this reflection, I think that probably public value could also be an alternative to the now buzzword of sustainability. This is a kind of provocation I would like to make. We have the European directive on sustainability reporting, due diligence for cooperation. But at the end of the day, what we are talking about is how private corporation create public value. And that could be also a way to take away these regulations from also to some extent right-left debate. I think public value goes beyond political orientation, because who can be against public value? No? While someone may be reluctant towards sustainability, because there might be the primacy of economic development, about free initiatives, etc. So there might be, and we now see very opposition. No? There is someone that is completely opposed by this sustainability and saying that there is no global warming. But on the other hand, I think that instead public value is a cross-sectoral, is also, understand, I took this note about, is a basis for the democratic fabric of society. So it permeates different societal and of course affect the whole population, so regardless the political orientation. So as a provocation, leaving then to Timo and Clemens maybe some reflection, I would like to say, can public value represent something to stay, and I believe that, but something that can also allow to coalesce and taking away more fashionable managerial trends that we are always observing, and then aggregate the interest of practice as well as research and the like. And just a final provocation that came to my mind. I don't know what you think would be.
Thank you. Thank you. To me, it's not a provocation. It's something I fully share. ESG, sustainability, SDG, others come and go. Public value is here to stay, because it's deeper roots in the common good discourse. Let's say since Aristotle, who whom you ever want to cite. Just imagine 50 years ago, let's say our parents, or partly grandparents, would not have considered their consumer choices when buying furniture, being furniture from plastics. Mm-hmm. These days we all care. Mm-hmm. By then, there was enough oil, maybe, let's say so. We didn't care so much about the environment and about decarbonization. But these days we care a lot about this. So the concerns, what is part of the public value themes, come and go. But they all have to legitimize their existence against whether it serves or hurts the collective. 50 years ago, it was different. Now, since January 20th, we experienced that the focus on climate change and sustainability is kind of vanishing again out of the public value realm. Let's see how institutions, also like our universities, can withstand this trend of the United States, US universities, to leave out all the climate diversity, whatsoever ideas from their websites, and let's see how Europe will respond. So sustainability is one candidate in the public value realm, but it's not taken for granted that it will stay. What I would also like to add is when we started with the dimensions, we were kind of asked, why is sustainability not in the dimensions? Because this is not a direct need of babies, human beings. Mm-hmm. It's an indirect effect of having life quality and so on. The second, what is also very important, in particular in Italy, in Bologna and Ferrara, of course, you can see that public value has also an aesthetical dimension. We should not only think about morality and business, but hedonistic, aesthetical, the culture, architecture, the spirit of the place, genius loci, are also part of it. So public value tries to address the whole human nature with shifting priorities, giving zeitgeist, politics. So I agree fully with your provocation.
Thank you, Timo. And I think we can get to a close. What do you think, Luca? Unless you have some final word to say.
We covered a lot of...
Yeah, and we just have 15 minutes late, so it's time to get to a close. And I would like to thank you again, Timo and Clemens, for being with us today and for contributing to the development of the debate of public value here in Ferrara with us. So thank you once again. And thank you to all of you that took part to this initiative. As I said, it's going to be the first initiative of this kind, or inviting more international speakers in order to let the debate beyond the boundaries of our national or local context, and so be on that respect more open, wide to the general debate. So thank you, and of course most of you already know about the Cervat Research Center. You are master students or researchers, but as always, if you have interest in engaging or be member of the Cervat, have a look at our website, follow us in all the session network that we are in, LinkedIn and others, right? I'm not very social person, but I'm in LinkedIn at least on that. So thank you, and have a nice rest of the day, and I hope to see you again in our future initiative. Thank you.